How's it going, guys? It's Hobby from West 1000. Today is July 25th, 2020, as Hurricane Hanna is just off the coast of southern Texas, about to make landfall within an hour or two. And today we're going to primarily focus on Hurricane Hanna as it makes landfall. So here's the current radar. We're starting to see those rain bands and those squall lines spiral in through Texas. And keep in mind, some of these squall lines could contain sustained winds at this point of 50 miles per hour. However, since the southern Texas coast is entering pretty much the eye wall at this point, we could see sustained winds a little higher than that, as you're gonna begin to experience the eye wall of the storm as it approaches the coast. However, I still suspect that the strongest winds will be still to the northeast of this storm, like most hurricanes. Because usually in the northeastern side it deals with less wind shear, and usually that area of the hurricane, the winds coincide with the typical trade winds that would occur in the Atlantic, which is why the northeastern side is stronger. It's always stronger in an Atlantic hurricane. And I expect that the strongest winds will be maybe just south of Corpus Christi. So for the people in Corpus Christi, I wouldn't let your guard down just because it's going to make landfall just south of you guys, because you still could experience the northern eye wall of this storm, which may be the more potent side of this storm. I still think it's going to be a little bit further south, the northern eye wall of this storm. However, it will be close enough to where you could easily experience the same winds of 50 miles per hour and potentially hurricane force wind gusts in Corpus Christi. So definitely keep that in mind. If we take a look at the current composition of this hurricane, you see that the eye is starting to form, which in my opinion is quite a defined eye for a category 1 hurricane that's only at 80 miles per hour. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if this strengthens into maybe an 85 to 80 mile per hour hurricane as we move forward. So here's the current wind field. 90 mile per hour hurricane. So here's the current wind field of Hurricane Hanna, and you can see that it's quite large for a category 1 hurricane. Its millibar pressure is down to 978, which is a bit lower than what you typically see in the 80 mile per hour hurricane, which pretty much gives proof that this storm is larger than the typical hurricane. And that's definitely worrying, because although this may be only a category 1, the stronger wind field means that you're more likely to see a larger storm surge threat. You're more likely to see a longer duration event when it comes to tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds if you're within the center of circulation. And to add on to it is that this is moving west at only 7 miles per hour, so it's going to move quite slowly over southern Texas, and that's going to be a problem, since it's going to dump a lot more rain, and with the large wind field combined with how slow the storm is moving, we're going to see a long duration event when it comes to wind. So combined with the rainfall threat and the long duration wind event, I would suspect in this area a lot of trees go down as a result, and a lot more wind damage than you'd expect for a category 1 hurricane. So definitely keep that in mind. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised at all if in the next update, which comes in only in a couple minutes, it's 1:46 Eastern Standard Time at this point. This is as of the 10 a.m. Central Time advisory, so only in about 15 minutes, maybe when I'm done with this video, we'll see an update. But I wouldn't be surprised if this strengthens into an 85 to maybe 90 mile per hour hurricane, which is borderline a Cat 2 and a large category 2 at that. So definitely keep that in mind. And if we take a look at the water vapor imagery to see Hurricane Hanna, you could see that there's a large span of water vapor extending miles out from the center of circulation, which means that you're more likely to see a pretty much bigger rainfall threat and larger wind field with this storm. And in terms of anything that could either hinder it or potentially help strengthen this storm in the future, we do have a little bit of dry air over northern Texas that may slow it down a little bit. And in fact, this dry air is sort of making this storm a little bit lopsided, where we're seeing more of that moisture and more of that development and that convection to the southern side of this storm, while the northern side, while there is convection in that area, it's a little bit smaller. Well, it's a lot smaller than the southern side as a result of this dry air just to the north of it, pretty much hindering any convection to extend much further up north. So however, I still don't think this dry air will be enough to strengthen it, because it isn't, like I said, there isn't a ton of dry air. A ton of dry air is what's over the Atlantic at this point, where we're seeing the dark black. In Texas, while it's darker in this region, it isn't so dark to where it would really affect this storm much. And plus, there isn't that much wind shear that would push that more stable air into the center of circulation. So it isn't really going to do much, this dry air, to really hinder this from strengthening at all, pretty much. And in terms of wind shear, it's light for the most part. However, we are seeing strong wind shear just to the east of this storm, where we're seeing winds coming, upper level winds coming from the south through the Gulf of Mexico. However, this storm is far enough to the west to where it's going to miss out on a lot of that wind shear that would otherwise hinder it from developing. And that was the same wind shear that was hindering Hanna from developing a couple days earlier, when it was more in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. However, it's too far east to really get a strong influence of this wind shear, because you see that in this area we're seeing winds coming from the south, and that's pretty much going against the typical trade winds you'd see in this region, where we'd usually see winds coming from the southeast to the northwest, but it's coming from the south, which means that there's strong wind shear in this area. However, it's just far to east, to the west enough to where it won't really get affected by this wind shear, which is unfortunate, because that would pretty much cap Hanna from really strengthening any further than maybe a low NCAT 1 or even a tropical storm. So I don't expect that to really stop this storm from developing much. And other than that, the water temperatures are more than warm enough to support tropical cyclone development, and there isn't that much wind shear or dry air enough to really stop this from developing any further. So I definitely do expect this to develop. If you take a look at the current satellite loop for as of right now, and it's becoming more and more visible that it's beginning to develop a little bit of an eye. However, I think in this latest one, it's really trying to develop an eye within the center of circulation. I don't think it's likely that it'll develop entirely, because we're very close to landfall at this point. I don't think it's going to have enough time to really develop a full eye that could potentially strengthen it into category 2. However, since we're seeing evidence that an eye is forming in this region, it really shows that this is definitely strengthening, since what an eye pretty much represents is that there's a lot of latent heat that's being released above the cloud tops of this storm. And when there's a lot of latent heat above the cloud tops of this hurricane, that usually means that there's a lot of rising air and a lot of condensation occurring, which means that there's more convection, and more convection means that we have a stronger storm in our hands. So seeing an eye trying to develop is definitely showing that this storm is still strengthening despite making landfall. Like I said, I don't think it's going to have enough time to really develop a full eye, which could make it look like a picture perfect hurricane or a category 2 or category 3 hurricane. However, the fact that it's developing an eye means that it's definitely strengthening, and I wouldn't be surprised if this develops into an 85 to 90 mile per hour storm within the next update. And speaking of the next update, let me refresh, see if we got the next update. As of right now, it's 1:52. Let me see. No, it's still the same. It didn't update it yet, so I don't know if it's gonna update fast enough by the time this video ends. But it doesn't really matter of the strength at this point, because whether it's 80, 85, 90 mile per hour storm, there's still quite large in terms of wind field, category 1 hurricane, and it's going to move quite slowly. So we may see a more potent than usual category 1 hurricane make landfall along the Texas coast. And in terms of the flash flood risk, like I said, this storm is going to move slower than your typical hurricane. Usually hurricanes move between 10 to 15 miles per hour. This storm is only moving 7 miles per hour to the west, so it's moving very slowly, and as a result, that rain is going to stay over the same area for a long time, and we could see an increased flash flood threat through Texas, as in the extreme southern portions of Texas, right along the Mexico and Texas border, we're seeing a high 50% chance of flash flooding all throughout this region, which is quite high in this region. If you live near small creeks or in a area that's prone to flash flooding, then I'd definitely prepare as a flash flood is happening, because a 50% chance of a flash flood happening is quite a high chance, and I see it likely as well, since it's likely the eye wall is going to move over you and pretty much stay over the same area for hours. And then if we move up a little bit more north, the chance decreases to moderate and then to slight to marginal just along the Louisiana and Texas coast and just north of the Houston area. And I also want to keep in mind, because of this large storm, it's going to extend areas far out from the eye, like Houston. You could still see flooding from this storm and high winds, and even storm surge from this storm is expected all the way far up north, since this is a large wind field that's going to push a lot of that Gulf of Mexico water onto the coast. So storm surge is definitely expected well beyond the eye of this storm, and that's something I want to say, because because some people assume that just because the eye is far from their area that they won't experience the impact. However, that's far from the case, as storm surge is expected all throughout the coast, and heavy rain as well, where we could see an area of 10 to 15 inches of rain around the South Padre Island area of Texas, which is just insane. And by the way, this is over the next 3 days, so that's a ton of rain to see over the next 3 days. You could also see 6 to 10 inches of additional rain on top of what you've already experienced in Texas throughout southern Texas, and that will create a lot of flash flooding. And flash flooding, I would say, is likely throughout this region, and even extending far up north, where you could see 2 to 4 inches, extending all the way to the extreme southern portion of the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and all the way through Louisiana, through Houston, and through Corpus Christi, where Corpus Christi could see 4 to 8 inches of rain in this area. So definitely prepare for flooding in southern Texas. In terms of storm surge, to get a better idea of how much storm surge you'll experience through Texas. So in case you don't know, storm surge is pretty much the amount of water above what you typically see on an average day at the beach. So let's say you're on ground, and let's say the storm surge in Corpus Christi is 3 to 5 feet. So pretty much stand on like ground where you're pretty much by the ocean, near sea level, and then add 3 to 5 feet on top of that, and that's the amount of storm surge you could experience along the coast. And that's quite a lot, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge along the coast. And to put that in perspective, only 6 inches of swiftly moving water can knock you off your feet, and 2 feet could move an entire car. So 3 to 5 feet is well above the threshold of when it comes to flooding that could pretty much float a car. So definitely keep in mind along the Corpus Christi region, and then just south of it, we're gonna see 2 to 4 feet. The storm surge won't be as high, since it's less likely we're gonna see direct winds coming directly from the east, since the eye is going to move over this area. So we're mostly going to experience south to southwest winds in this region, which will limit the storm surge. However, there's still a chance of storm surge of 1 to 3 feet and 2 to 4 feet along the southern Texas coast, and then even extending all the way to the Houston area and Galveston Bay. We could see 1 to 2 feet of storm surge, despite the eye being pretty much hundreds of miles away from the Galveston coast. So definitely keep that in mind if you're along the northern Texas coast. And in terms of the current winds expected that you're experiencing along the Texas coast right now, according to the Weather Channel map, for most of the Texas coast right now, they're experiencing sustained winds between 40 and 50 miles per hour, which, keep in mind, those are sustained winds. That's above tropical storm force. And then I'd suspect those wind gusts are even higher than that, at around near hurricane force strength. And I think a couple hours ago in South Padre Island, they experienced a wind gust of 68 miles per hour, which isn't that far from hurricane threshold of 73 miles per hour. So those winds will definitely cause damage, bring trees down, power outages are likely. And as the storm continues to strengthen, we could see potentially a moderate wind threat throughout this region, and maybe wind gusts up to 100 miles per hour. I can't rule that out if this storm strengthens into a 90 mile per hour storm. However, for those along the coast, along the eye wall of this storm, I would expect your winds will be sustained between 50 to 70 miles per hour, with wind gusts potentially going up to 80 or 90 if and maybe 100 if this strengthens. So let me, this completely refreshed. Yeah, this is gonna be slow, guys, but just know that along the coast, I would expect along the eye wall sustained winds of 50 to 70 miles per hour and gusts up to 90. And just outside of it, I would expect winds mainly between 30 to maybe 50 mile per hour sustained winds, with wind gusts maybe up to 60 in some isolated areas. So and I would say that's a forecast for the Corpus Christi area, which is several miles which is going to be several miles north of the eye wall of this storm. However, just south of it, you're going to experience the northern eye wall of this storm, which will contain the strongest winds, and that's definitely something to keep in mind in the future as we head into the landfall hours of this storm. But I guess this is it for this video. For southern Texas, I would say prepare now. Well, not prepare, it's already too late to prepare, but hunker down, since I would expect sustained winds of 70 miles per hour to be possible along the eye, and wind gusts over 90. And along the coast, make sure to stay above ground and stay far away from windows or any area where flying debris could potentially hurt someone or damage your property. So definitely stay prepared along the southern Texas coast at this point. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. I'll do videos on the other tropical cyclones as well. I know Hurricane Douglas will impact Hawaii probably as a hurricane, and I know that there's Tropical Storm Gonzalo, which doesn't have much of a chance of developing, and I know, and there's also a tropical disturbance in Invest we need to watch that could potentially become a really strong hurricane, as the forecast models are suggesting. So I'm definitely gonna make those videos soon as Hurricane Hanna makes landfall, and I'm gonna make more videos focusing on those tropical disturbances at this point. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a good day and stay safe along the southern Texas coast.